Yo.
Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, not too much, man. How about yourself?
Not too much, just chilling.
Hey, so yeah, you wanted to discuss like the ecological stuff.
Yeah, that's confused me for a while because I think if we were able to euthanize in like a painless way, all of the I guess it's odd order predators,
Mm-hmm.
um, that would be something I'd be on board with. But I have no response to the idea that I've heard of conservationists saying that for instance deer populations are overpopulated because they have no predators, and that makes me think well, we're putting these deer, I'm in a big city, and in the county, I'm seeing deer run across streets and they stuff like that, they're in places where they can get in a lot of harm, um and I'm seeing that, and I'm thinking well, maybe I don't really have a response for the idea that we should wipe out all these we should wipe out all odd order predators without having a plan in place for making sure that these populations of herbivores don't roam their way into areas where they could be put into more harm.
Well, more harm is something that I'm not actually convinced of. See, my position on the matter is I don't really know whether or not any, because I do admit that there will be ecological downstream effects. Like if we just snapped our fingers and there was no more odd order predators, like there definitely would be ecological downstream consequences of that. I'm unconvinced that these would be net drains in utility compared to letting them exist in perpetuity. If those are the only two options, blinking them out of existence or letting them persist in perpetuity, I'm really unconvinced that it would be a net negative in the long run to let them or to blink the odd order predators out of existence.
Is there any research on the idea of alternatives to handling, for instance, because I this is the thing always comes to mind is the deer population, because that's a big problem in our area, in my area.
Mm-hmm.
Like what would you suggest based on your research, or what researcher would you point me towards that would help me to understand what we can do with that situation?
Well, I don't know if I've actually read any research about any of these topics, to be honest. That may actually have something to do with the particular position that I take, because I take an agnostic position as to whether or not there would be it would be a greater increase or decrease in utility in the long run. But what I do know is that there are like innocent creatures being ripped apart. That's what I do know. And I do know that if the odd order predators, like if they were blinked out of existence, I do know that there would be overpopulation problems. But I don't. But I'm agnostic as to whether or not that is um, a greater or lesser drain on utility than letting them exist in perpetuity.
I see. So I can see where you're coming from. It's just the lack of the, the problem is the lack of certainty is what makes me uncomfortable with the idea.
Yeah, I mean, lack of certainty makes me uncomfortable about a lot of things. But say like we don't know what the long-term consequences of something will be. We don't know whether or not the long-term consequences will spare suffering or cause more suffering. But what we do know is that there are some rights being violated, and we, my personal view is that we should take action against those rights being violated. And as long as we're agnostic about the long-term consequences, it would seem to be like I would consider it to be something that's morally right to do. Now, I should actually caveat all of this because a lot of people in my comments, I've deleted a lot of these comments because, my God, they were so cancerous. But a lot of people in the comments seem pretty confused about like my position more broadly on the subject. If we had the technology to separate prey from predator without entailing ecological devastation or um, uh, like incurring, say, like utility drains or anything like that. Like if we had a technological means of separating them from each other such that they didn't have to eat each other and they didn't have to die in like agony, I would certainly choose that over culling them. Like I think anybody in the space would certainly choose that over culling them. So yeah, it's not my position that for all things these animals must go. It's just within the current sets of logistical constraints, I just don't really see an alternative other than like going out and getting some tags to hunt them. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I guess just like my last question is like, what would you say to like I have a friend who's like sympathetic to like I'm not a very like I haven't convinced him fully, but he's gone mostly vegan. But he's just like says something about like hunting to be like, well, we need to control deer populations by hunting them because that's what conservationists say. Like, what would you say to that person if you had the opportunity?
See, it's claims like that I'm super skeptical of because like what work is the word need doing, and what exactly is being preserved by engaging in that behavior? Like you could say like, okay, yeah, they're overpopulated, but overpopulated with respect to what? Like clearly they have like some standard that they think has to be maintained, like some ecological standard. I would not be the least bit shocked if this all cashed out into aesthetic concerns. Like we like the ecology the way it looks. It's aesthetically like really pleasing to us. We want the deer to be around because we like deer and we seem to have this fascination with preserving species. I would be really shocked if that didn't just collapse into some really weird, bizarre aesthetic concern and that entire domain was just purely like an aesthetic pursuit.
I could see that 100%, but the problem is like it's so ingrained in culture. Like we preserve species, like we send them to zoos to like control to like get them to like boost their populations. We like preserve like it's a tragedy when a species goes extinct. I'm not saying like I'm completely callous. Like there is a little bit of sadness if like a species I like is no longer, but I agree. Like it is kind of an aesthetic thing. Like it's a matter because I like the species. It's not because a matter I'm concerned necessarily 100%. I am concerned for their suffering, generally speaking, but this particular issue with like I guess extinction is particularly with aesthetics. I could see that.
Yeah, like in my experience, conservationists like they very rarely talk about things like utility. They very rarely talk about things like how the extinction of a given species will affect human populations. Like take the elk, for example. The elk got very close to extinction before or at least the American elk got relatively close to extinction before conservation efforts actually reintroduced the elk across a lot of its native range. What exactly was supposed to be the downside to letting the elk go extinct? Like, I haven't heard a good kind of argument for this. Like, what exactly was supposed to be the downside?
It does, yeah. It has like a very, like intuitively, like the first instinct is like, oh, this is a good thing. They like, but if you actually like, I can't come up with anything like.
Yeah, I mean, the only downsides that I can think of is that listen, we have the capacity for more sentient beings on the planet that can experience well-being if they didn't go extinct. That's like the one thing that I could think of that I could get on board with. But if somebody's like, oh, if the elk go extinct, we lose out on having this beautiful animal around. It's like, okay, so it collapses down into an aesthetic concern. Or like the wolves will have nothing to hunt or something like that. And it's like, well, is that supposed to be a downside? Because that's not intuitive to me how that's a downside. I suspect that a lot of these will really just collapse down into kind of half-baked aesthetic concerns. I mean, I'm happy to be wrong about it. It's not a strong intuition that I have. Like if there are any conservationists that want to like explain to me what the downside of, say, the American elk going extinct is, I'd be more than happy to hear that explanation.
The explanation for the elk going extinct is that Joe Rogan wouldn't be able to hunt them anymore. Yeah, dude, Joe Rogan, he wouldn't have any elk dick to suck. It's unfortunate.
Shit, yeah, no more elk balls for him.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
no
legit.
More elk, desiccated elk testes.
Yeah. But, yeah, hopefully my position's a little clearer. Like, it wasn't my intention to come across as, like, dodging the topic. I just think in that particular instance, the point that I was trying to make was that, listen, imagine arguing for, like, unknown consequences in any other situation where we're trying to spare, like, innocent creatures dying. Just like, no, don't save that innocent creature. There might be some downstream negative consequence that, you know, we're not quite aware of. Imagine arguing that, like, if an axe murderer is running toward a woman and her children, for example. Like, it'd be really weird to stop and ponder that instead of just intervening.
Right. Yeah. So I kind of get your position in a better light now. I dodging is probably too hard, but
no, it's all good.
Dodging is probably too harsh of a word, but I was confused on your like what your actual like argument was.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
For a little bit.
No, you're good, man. Don't worry. Like, it's a legitimate concern, and I think I maybe did come across a little wishy-washy in the discussion. So I perfectly understand how somebody could get that impression. But yeah, just to show that I'm not like dodging on the subject, like I'm perfectly willing to sit down and have a conversation about it.
Okay, yeah, I'll delete that comment.
No, it's all good. It's all good. You can leave it up. It's fine.
Okay.
But yeah, I think we got everything that we wanted to get.
I think so.
Awesome.
I do feel a little bit of that uncertainty, like with like not always knowing what to say, is somewhat, you know, saddening to me. But I guess it is what it is. I'll just have to look more into it.
For sure.